In 2019, Ghana formally closed the book on a colonial-era educational model that prioritized rote recall over cognitive development. The pre-tertiary education system underwent a systemic overhaul. The government rolled out the Standards-Based Curriculum, or SBC. Its statutory ambition is to replace rigid memorization with a framework demanding critical thinking, inquiry, and collaborative problem-solving. This policy represents a strict departure from the old objective-based curriculum. It reconstructs basic education around the 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and creativity, establishing them as the operational pillars for lifelong learning. Yet this high-level policy ambition directly conflicts with the actual environments where millions of students operate. Across rural districts, learners attempt to achieve 21st-century competencies inside decaying 19th-century infrastructure. 5 years into the rollout, the data shows a severe page-to-playground gap. The curriculum's theoretical design is stalling against the realities of classroom execution. Ghana's curriculum reform is failing to scale because the statutory policy ambition has vastly outpaced the nation's physical and fiscal infrastructure. When an idealized, resource-intensive educational framework collides with a broken physical reality, the system generates friction, compromising the fidelity of the instruction. Without the structural capacity to support its implementation, a progressive constructivist curriculum does not level the playing field. It actively worsens existing regional and socioeconomic inequities. The centralization of Ghana's education dates back to early post-colonial reforms. The 1951 Accelerated Development Plan successfully expanded access and built teacher training networks, but it retained an academic-heavy, highly rigid structure. This diagram visualizes the pedagogical pivot of the 2019 SBC. It dismantles the linear, product-focused pipeline, replacing it with a process-focused, social constructivist model. The framework establishes a 12-year seamless progression built around 6 core competencies, including digital literacy and cultural identity. To bridge primary education to specialized secondary pathways, the system introduces the Common Core Program, or CCP, tailored specifically for the junior high school level. This transition required overhauling the national assessment regime. The high-stakes terminal barrier of the basic education certificate examination shatters, replaced by the National Standardized Test. Operating as checkpoints, these tests generate diagnostic data, feeding back into the system to guide continuous instructional improvement. The SBEC is structurally sound on paper, engineered to create capable analytical citizens. But that architecture holds only if the physical classroom environment permits inquiry and collaboration. This map shows the 2021 National Standardized Test outcomes, revealing stark regional achievement disparities. Learners in the Ahafa region outperform peers by 15 marks in English. The success directly correlates with a heavy concentration of qualified teachers, ICT labs, and modern infrastructure in urban zones. Meanwhile, a severe textbook gap paralyzed the rest of the country. For years following the 2019 launch, primary schools operated without official curriculum-aligned teaching materials. Deprived of physical resources, teachers were forced to rely on unvetted internet downloads. This frequently introduced westernized content into classrooms, actively compromising the curriculum's explicit goal of reinforcing Ghanaian cultural identity. The curriculum also mandates digital literacy as an integrated competency across all subjects, requiring functional hardware to execute the lesson plans. This visualization breaks down the government's digital procurement response. Out of a population of 2.7 million eligible secondary students, initial distribution delivered only 450,000 tablets, providing a fraction of the hardware required by the policy. Even when those devices reached rural schools, the lack of basic electricity grids and stable internet connectivity rendered the digital tools completely useless in practice. Beyond materials and technology, the most immediate physical bottleneck is spatial. Schools face severe overcrowding and a critical shortage of basic furniture. The curriculum demands collaborative, project-based learning. Facilitating group work and individualized inquiry is physically impossible to execute when class sizes frequently exceed 80 students packed into a single room. demanding that students demonstrate digital competencies and complex problem-solving while depriving them of textbooks, computers, and physical space is a direct violation of equitable education. A curriculum is only as effective as the educators delivering it. The systemic inadequacy of professional preparation has severely limited the teachers tasked with implementing the SBC. Initial government training relied on rushed 5-day episodic workshops. These sessions transferred basic administrative instructions, but failed to instill the deep pedagogical philosophy required to execute social constructivism. While many educators understand the theory, they lack the practical confidence to actually integrate ICT tools or facilitate complex, learner-centered strategies in real time. The administrative solution was to establish local professional learning communities to provide continuous development. However, these communities are failing to function due to weak local leadership and a complete lack of trained subject leads. This capacity deficit is further complicated by sociocultural friction. Curriculum reform requires a highly contested negotiation of national and societal values. In early 2026, teacher unions fiercely pushed back against gender identity content discovered in physical education manuals. The resulting opposition forced the withdrawal of the materials to align them with accepted national cultural standards. This cultural friction is amplified by intense industrial unrest. Strikes over undelivered educator laptops and the explicit exclusion of teacher unions from core curriculum design committees have fractured the relationship between the state and its workforce. Ignoring the societal values and the daily practical realities of frontline educators transforms them from curriculum champions into active administrative bottlenecks. Resolving this implementation gap requires auditing the fiscal root of the problem. The long-term sustainability of the SBC is constrained by misaligned national education budgets. This chart details the 2025 distribution of the GET Fund, the primary mechanism for education infrastructure. It reveals a heavily skewed allocation, where 68.5%. To close the gap, procurement must be immediately realigned. The state must prioritize delivering physical, hard copy textbooks to the 4.1 million basic learners currently operating without them, ahead of aspirational hardware projects. Infrastructure planning must adapt to geographical realities. Deploying localized solar-powered internets allows off-grid schools to access digital materials, bypassing the wait for national grid expansion. Third, human capital investment must evolve. Professional development needs to shift away from off-site workshops towards incentivized school-embedded training that strictly focuses on digital pedagogy and execution. The state must also rapidly scale remedial frameworks, like the differentiated Learning Plus model, to address the widespread crisis of foundational learning currently impacting higher grade levels. International partnerships, including the Gallup and GEOP outcomes funds, are already proving that results-based financing successfully drives these exact targeted literacy interventions. Ghana must transition its focus from the mere administrative adoption of curriculum policy to the deep structural routinization of equitable educational practice. Until fiscal allocations, physical infrastructure, and stakeholder integration match the scale of the state's ambition, Ghana's 21st century curriculum will remain trapped on the page.